podcast is part of the Batman Universe Podcast Network, hosted by the BatmanUniverse.net. Here, we love talking about everything Batman. The BatmanUniverse.net has news, original content, and reviews about Batman comics, movies, TV shows, video games, and more. Check out the BatmanUniverse.net and join our Discord server to start chatting with fellow fans. We can't wait to talk to you guys. Also, visit our Patreon page and join our other awesome supporters. But enough of this nonsense. On with the show.
Hey, Bat fans. Welcome to the Batman Universe Podcast, episode 253. If I sound a little nasally, it's because I am coming down from a cold that I've had for a little over a week, but we're still good to go. I'm your host, Scott, and joining me is my co-host, BJ. Since our last episode, a certain Max TV show trailer dropped featuring Colin Farrell's Penguin, and it inspired our topic for this episode. So we are going into all Penguin all the time. So get your umbrellas ready, friends, because today we're talking about a certain feathered felon by name of Oswald Cobblepot. But first, we have our Let's Kick Some Icebreaker. BJ, what's a more recent Batman story you've been obsessed with?
I think I would probably say the Long Halloween, the animated movie adaptation. I love that story. I love that comic. And I was pretty pumped when that movie came out. And I was cautious about it because I know I didn't want to get too hyped for it because I love the story so much and be disappointed by the movie. But that movie, it did work for me, and I was a big fan of it.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think you wrote the reviews on the site, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll have to link those below for everybody who's curious to hear BJ's thoughts on that adaptation. I'm also glad that you went outside the comic book realm. I know we have the comic podcast and this is everything else. So kudos for zipping by and jumping into that. But that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
For my Batman story I've been obsessed with more recently, admittedly, it's the first Batman 89 miniseries that they did like a little over a year ago now. This current one I'm not really vibing with. My reviews are on the site, so people can find out why. But the first one, I was all on board. I read that thing through 2 or 3 times already. Like I was pretty jazzed. But a lot of that revolves around both the art style and Billy D. Williams as Two-Face. So seeing that characterization.
Yeah, I haven't gone back and read that first miniseries, but I agree. This new one, I wish Batman was in it. For the like kind of that's just I like a Batman story with Batman in it. I might be different in that, but
yeah, and it's so confusing too. I mean, that's actually kind of a big part of my reviews is there's so much subplots and like shadowy deals and things going on in the background that it feels like you're reading a big exposition dump each issue so far. And granted, it's been like 3 months between issue 1 and 2, and that's all that's out. So anyone looking to hop on the bus, you have plenty of time, judging by their release schedule. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about the Penguin teaser trailer, which dropped almost like a day or two after our last episode. It was pretty quick. The link for the trailer is below for anyone who hasn't seen it, but right off the bat, BJ, how'd you feel about it?
I dug it. I was really into it. It gave me that like almost like a Sopranos vibe in the Batman universe. And it was like almost kind of one big monologue of Oswald Cobblepot. It could like intercut with some scenes, which I was really into. Colin Farrell's performance as Penguin was great in the Batman, and I'm excited to see it keep going in this show.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. I mean, we're getting 8 episodes, and they definitely seem to frame it around the Penguin as our protagonist, which you would expect, but it's nice to see that the teaser kind of frames it that way. One thing I wanted to point out, and this was just, I watched this trailer a few times, And at the 44-second mark in the trailer, there's a man with a metal brace or something under the heel of his shoes as he's like climbing stairs. And the way the trailer's cut, we're led to believe it's Oswald because prior to that, it's Oswald talking and we see a scene with him, but then it cuts to these, mysterious feet going up the stairs. And you could say they're a waddle of the Penguin, but I'm kind of suspicious and thinking it's a tease and it's somebody else. And so I was going to ask you, did you notice that? And do you think that could be another villain?
Yeah, I didn't know. I noticed it, but I didn't really think it to be anybody else until I saw on the show notes that you thought about that. So I was like, who could it be? But I wonder if I don't know if that was ever teased that he had some type of metal brace in the Batman in the movie. I want to have to go back and look. I don't know if he had something happen to his leg or if somebody broke his leg or something at the end of that movie, or maybe he got it hurt when the floods happened or something like that. But yeah, I don't remember in the movie him having any type of metal brace.
Yeah, I mean, he had the limp for sure, but
Yeah,
yeah, I don't remember the brace. So I was just kind of wondering if that's like because there's always going to be surprises and some kind of hoping it's a villain. I know for a while, the original incarnation of Clayface, before he gets his powers and everything, was something that was heavily teased. And of course, we don't know if that's true or not, but I like to lean that way because it sounds like it could be Matt Reeves style, but it could totally be anybody else. I mean, it's anyone's game. Though I imagine they would probably pick a smaller time villain to throw in here, someone that's maybe unexpected and not like a big bad for Batman to fight. But that said, do you have any other predictions or things you wanted to point out about the trailer?
predictions. I don't think so. I do keep saying like I think we're gonna get a small Batman cameo, Robert Pattinson. But other than that, I have no big predictions.
Yeah, I do think along the same lines we'll probably get Batman at some point, probably at the end, I would imagine.
Yeah,
Like
I could see like like a last scene, like they have kind of a as Oswald finally takes over the city, like from the criminal standpoint, like just a face to face at the end, leading
yeah,
into the next movie or something like that.
maybe it'll even be Batman threatening him saying, "Hey, you're gonna squeal for me."
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if we'll get any other like costumed villain cameos, but I could definitely see the show to really lean into that like underground organized crime characters from Batman.
I do, now that we're talking about it, the gears are turning. So I do wonder if maybe we'll get like, characters that people like Bat fans know of that, aren't heavily advertised, like Alberto Falcone or something,
Like
Just a-
Rupert Thorne. Give me Rupert Thorne. I think that'd be a crazy pull, and
that would, yeah,
he fits right into that world of organized crime and things like that. Give me like a meeting of the five families of Gotham or something like that.
I would love that. That would be such a swerve too. It'd be so
Yeah,
cool. But for our listeners who, we've talked about this before, but the Penguin debuts in the fall. That's all the trailer tells us. It's going to be 8 episodes on Max and co-stars Clancy Brown as Salvatore Melroni and Kristen Milioti as Sophia Falcone. Speaking of the Penguin, though, we have a little bit more news with Colin Farrell. I do want to preface some things. The day we're recording is April Fool's Day, and in true April Fool's Day fashion, there was a lot of Batman related news floating around the internet that I was paying attention to, and a lot of it was fake and weird, jokes and pranks. So if there are things you may have heard that don't appear in this episode, I was trying to be very studious in ferreting these things out. One of the ones was the Batman Part Two is going to be split into two movies that were going to debut 6 months apart from each other. So fun joke, but not happening.
Batman Part Two, Part One.
Yeah.
That'd be good.
Batman Part Two, 33 and a third,
Yeah,
and then we'll get the other two. So, in tandem with the trailer releasing for the Penguin, Colin Farrell was on the interview circuit, not for the Penguin necessarily, for a movie instead, but they did, touch upon the show. And I have a clip from an interview I will also link below. But in this clip, I'll just quote it. It's from an interview Colin Farrell did with Movie Zine. And a lot of people have been, running wild with this quote. But Colin Farrell says about the Penguin, it's really dark. It's really heavy, I think. It certainly was doing it, which is not to say I didn't have fun. I had an amazing time doing it. It's incredibly violent. It's one man's rise to what he's always dreamed of inhabiting, which is a certain power or social status. And I think that's a really cool quote. And I like, as someone who likes the grit and the grime and the muck and the, action, I like to see the incredibly violent, phrase put there and see it associated with like Gotham City crime. That kind of gets me a little excited. But, in tandem with that quote, Colin Farrell noted that the filming just wrapped a few weeks ago and that it's also super twisted and there are several figures vying for power. Of course, assumedly Falcone and Maroni being two of those, but also potentially hints at, maybe a mystery villain or, some other minor criminal characters, maybe Rupert Thorne popping in. So other than Batman and Rupert Thorne, are there any other characters you'd like to see?
I would love to see, and I think he would work in this world of that Matt Reeves has created, but I would love to see the ventriloquist and Scarface. Like, it would be weird. I think they could do it weird and creepy, almost like you just see this creepy puppet talking, like his mouth moving, and he's like threatening like all these gangsters and criminals in Gotham, and they're scared of him, even though that the ventriloquist is like this nerd, like he's the brains behind the operations. But I think it would work in this world that Reeves created.
Yeah, that's actually who I thought of when I wrote this question too.
Oh, perfect.
And if people have been listening to this podcast for a long time, or they go way back, when Dustin was hosting, that was a character I brought up that I really wanted to see in the films. So yeah, if they really make a janky looking wooden puppet, I think that could be so cool. And then they can have like, one actor play, Arnold Wesker, but someone entirely different voice Scarface, and that could be kind of a fun nod.
Yeah, like I'd never really like, just thinking of the Reeves verse in general. Like I don't really see Mr. Freeze. I know everybody kind of talks like this, the hot internet rumor, like a real life Mr. Freeze almost. I don't know. I want to kind of see the deep cuts and the characters that we haven't seen on film before, like a Scarface, or we've talked about Hush before. Just the characters that don't get as much pub.
Yeah, and I would agree. And I mean, and we are going to get obviously some mainstays because Joker was in the last film, so at some point that's coming, and I'm assuming with that maybe another one or two here that everyone's really familiar with.
I would like to see a Harvey Dent, but you never get like a tease of him becoming Two-Face almost. Like you never see like, would you see they put half his face in shadow there? I'd like to see like the DA, like Harvey Dent, and like even in like the Batman movie and the Batman Part 2, like he's just Harvey Dent throughout the whole movie, and like you never kind of build up to that Two-Face. You see the heroic side of Harvey Dent that we got bits and pieces in The Dark Knight.
It's funny you mention that because one of the rumors that I found that I could not verify because it comes from quote unquote an insider source, and that's all you get is Boyd Holbrook being pegged potentially for Harvey Dent. And for like listeners who don't know who that is, he was Donald Pierce in Logan. He was in the most recent Indiana Jones as one of the bad guys. He's been around for a while. I first saw him in Narcos. He was one of the two main.
He's awesome in Logan. I just kind of recently watched that movie. He's awesome in that movie.
Yeah, super intimidating villain. So I could totally see it if he was Harvey Dent, and because I feel like he could play both that and Two-Face.
Yeah, he'd be a good Two-Face too. Now that you mention it, and now I'm like, let's scar this bastard. Let's go.
Yeah, I echo those sentiments.
Hey, you got a second? The Batman universe is looking for Batman fans with something to say. If you're interested in writing reviews of your favorite Batman books, or you want to contribute original content with articles like the top 10 forgotten Batman villains, or why Dead Didio's exit from DC was the worst thing to ever happen, then we want to invite you to join our TBU staff family as a writer. Just reach out to our email, tbu@thebatmanuniverse.net, and let us know that you want to become one of our writers. It's that easy. And honestly, there's no reason not to. You get exclusive access to our TBU staff Discord server, you get early access to comics, and you meet a lot of cool people. What are you waiting for? Email us at tbu@thebatmanuniverse.net and let us know that you want to become one of our writers.
In celebration, or I guess, revolving around this topic of the Penguin and all the excitement for the show and the fact that he is getting his own TV show, which is kind of cool. And it is going to be of Sopranos Gotham style, with that heavy noir, vibe that Matt Reeves likes. I figured, it'd be a perfect time to look at the Penguin as a comic book character. And that is a big statement to make. And there are a lot of, for my Big Lebowski fans, there are a lot of ins, a lot of outs. So I tried to condense this as much as possible, like the Penguin's history, and try to hit on some of the finer points before we, take this deep dive. But one thing I wanted to mention is, BJ, you're reviewing the current the Penguin series that Tom King's writing. And I wanted to ask if you wanted to elaborate on this idea that, at least as far as the most recent characterization goes, Penguin seems like they're really leaning away from that craziness. They're embracing like the Silver Age goofiness of Penguin, but like playing it off as if, my understanding that Penguin was just like kind of faking it, to play a certain angle. And so as a reviewer, I kind of wanted to give you the floor if you wanted to elaborate and get readers up to speed.
Yeah, so I like that version of Penguin where he's not considered crazy, and if he were to get arrested, he wouldn't go to Arkham. He would just go to Blackgate because he's just a common criminal almost. But in the series by Tom King, like Penguin's been working. This is early days Batman, early days Penguin, early days costume crime in Gotham. So they have it where Penguin's at the Iceberg Lounge. He's working it, but he's also kind of like an informant for Batman, and like the criminals. Like the underworld criminals are kind of sensing that that Oswald's feeding Batman information. So as a way to like throw it off the trail, Oswald comes up with he sees the Riddlers out there and the Jokers and all the costumed criminals. So he kind of comes up with this persona, throws a top hat on, the monocle, like the cigarette and the cigarette holder, the tuxedo, and has flying around with goofy umbrellas, and he becomes like the Penguin. So he would be him and Batman stage like fights. Batman beats him up, throws him in Arkham, but because he's not crazy and he's kind of smarter than everybody, can kind of get off 6 months of good behavior, and he's back out on the street feeding Batman like tips and things like that. And then when the heat starts getting on Oswald, that's when they throw on the Penguin persona and they stage another fight and get tossed into Arkham. So it was pretty like a pretty interesting twist on the character and like his old school habits for the new day.
Yeah, that is. And that's kind of something, I like about the character as a whole is, if you look at his history and kind of the evolution, each era of the spin that's been put on him to move him from, his original golden age appearances to what he is now, and kind of cataloging that in order was fascinating to do. And so I like seeing that most recent incarnation, that you're currently in the throes of reviewing, contrasted against what he was. And so I'm going to jump right into it. I'm going to go into Penguin's wonky history and note, there have been a lot of retcons over the years, but originally he was just a thief. And a lot of his crimes revolved around looting and robbing both like institutions like museums and people, like rich people, whatever, it doesn't really matter. But he was just a big time thief, and that was kind of his angle. And for Batman the Animated Series fans, you see a lot of that in the earlier seasons of that show, these weird capers and the celebration of that. But as early as like Batman number 14, Penguin will also sell blueprints of his plans to other criminals who would go on and successfully pull heists, and so that was his angle, was he was kind of this weird criminal businessman too that was thrown in there. So he would also hide himself under the guise of a legitimate businessman, as far back as the Golden Age. But, more often than not, a lot of the stories revolved around him just being this goofy thief with, these big umbrellas and like birds and, what have you. That said, over the years, different writers would come on and he would evolve and make that transition to arms dealer and crime boss, that most people know him for today. And so things that fall into his background, like, in the Silver Age, they added this background of him being a kid who was bullied a lot when he was younger, and the old traditional bio that I knew Penguin first was as a kid, his mom made him carry an umbrella because she was afraid that he would get pneumonia because that's how his father died. And, she had a bird shop and that's where his fascination came from, but he was always being picked on. And so it put this chip on his shoulder. And that's, who the Penguin was. And like, you know, I don't know how you feel about that origin, BJ, but there was a time where I wasn't too keen on it. I was like, okay, it's not that exciting, but
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I never really have been locked down into one Penguin origin. Probably my earliest Penguin origin was Batman Returns and him, getting thrown in a basket and thrown out the window, basically. So, but for comics, I do like the idea of. I think I first saw this in one of the Arkham games where, the Wayne old Gotham were built on like the Waynes and the Cobblepots and the Elliots and things like that. I like how there's this like lineage of Cobblepot throughout Gotham, and they've always kind of been like a little crooked family almost that have always kind of gone against like Bruce Wayne's like great great grandfather or things like that. So yeah, I'm not into like the old oh, I was bullied as a kid, or I'm the misguided geek as villain, or anything like that. I've never really bought into that type of origin for any character, really. So
yeah, I feel like at one point in time, it probably didn't feel as like old hat or,
yeah,
weird. It was probably more acceptable. And I'm kind of like you. I do like the idea of like, him coming from this stodgy old lineage, and that's why he dresses kind of weird and, acts like snooty and stuck up.
yeah,
And that's, in the post-crisis DC, Alan Grant would come in and lean really into the high society aspect of Penguin's character, really going into that air of superiority and the super fine clothing and, this chip on his shoulder, because of that. And, in the early 90s, we got around to Penguin again wearing this moniker of, I'm a reformed businessman. And it's in one of my personal favorite stories, even though it still kind of plays into the nerd side of his character a little bit. Um, you have Penguin Triumphant, where he's like using a device to manipulate Wall Street earnings, and that's how he's making his money. He's stealing, but like kind of as like a smart businessman, kind of a, maybe like a weird Gordon Gekko of the DC universe. And his downfall, in that particular story really comes into play with him being super jealous of Bruce Wayne, and how, Bruce Wayne kind of gets around in that whole visage and image, and Penguin thinking he deserves that because he's, just as good, if not better. And so it's interesting because I feel like it's a transition motif that has a little bit of like the Silver Age in there, but like a lot more of the modern that they would really flesh out later. During No Man's Land, that's when Penguin really became a magnet of trade. And in the New 52, since they were starting over, we saw a lot of evolution of his character, a lot of things that, people touched on and really ran with, like the bullying came back into play, except it came from classmates and his siblings. And they really leaned into Penguin being more of a murderous figure in this version. Like he always was kind of a, well, not always, but he had committed murders before, but at least in the New 52, they really went dark with it, where he was a little more murder happy, like secretly poisoning and killing his siblings, and his classmates. And that's how he would avenge himself. And, that led to where we're at now, where we're in the post New 52 world, where anyone who's been keeping up with, Penguin lately, he's a guy who has apparently had 10 children, all of whom have passed away, save for two, Addison and Aiden. And Addison and Aiden were the ones who murder the others. So that said, we talked a little bit about like dislikes and like things you liked about the character. Are there anything, is there anything in his bio you would just like happily ditch?
Probably the killing his family members and killing his classmates. That is that like hardcore New 52 style where it just kind of didn't connect with me. Maybe it connected with newer readers at that time, but me kind of growing up on like the Super Friends cartoon or Batman 66 and seeing that version of the Penguin and like seeing him as that really running the Iceberg Lounge in the animated series and in the comics and being that guy who like knew how to get things in Gotham that Batman used as like think like in that No Man's Land era where it's like Oswald like operates like he does as much as I let him almost at like Batman thinking like Batman's always got one eye on him and like he knows he's doing illegal stuff, but unless he crosses some line, that's when Batman's going to drop the hammer on him. But yeah, I don't like that killing his siblings and family and classmates and things like that.
Yeah, totally. I'm kind of in the same boat. I think it's a little too far. And I like the idea that Penguin is more of a guy who, if he's going to avenge or rub someone out, there's going to be a lot of plausible deniability around it. He's not going to be the one that does it. It's going to go through a person who's going to go through another person to do it. And I don't think he would have been doing it, that young. I feel like there's got to be a learning curve. He doesn't just start off as like this hardcore killer necessarily. But do you have any favorite comic book stories involving the Penguin?
Yeah, I was thinking about this. Like as long as like I've been a Batman fan, like I can't really point to like some definitive Penguin story. Almost, I've read the Penguin Affair years ago. I actually kind of just like refound it again in my collection, like digging through long boxes. It's a story where like it first introduces Harold to Batman's world. So I'm excited to kind of reread that again. I actually just got done finished reading the Suicide Squad, those first 8 issues of 87, I believe, 1987, and Penguin actually pops up in those issues, like helping like Rick Flag and Deadshot and the other Suicide Squad characters to break into some Russian prison and free some prisoner. And it's kind of funny seeing it. Like I had no idea he was in it. It was funny seeing him in it and like talking in this old 80s Penguin style where he kept going like every time someone would say something to him, he would go, "Egad!" Like he kept saying that, and he's doing the "waak, waak, waak" and things like that. So it was pretty good. Like he was like the brains behind the breakout for the Suicide Squad. So it was pretty cool to see that.
Yeah, I like that. And that kind of really embraces the master planner aspect of it.
Yeah.
And I know you just mentioned Harold, but for people who are listening who don't know who Harold is, he was the engineer, guy that helps Bruce Wayne with tech, before like especially his car, I believe. You can correct me if I'm wrong, BJ.
Yeah.
But before, Lucius Fox really, became the mainstay who did all of that and more. But, mine I mentioned earlier, it was Penguin Triumphant. It was, it's a one-shot standalone thing. You could probably find it really cheap. That's how I got mine. But because it mixes kind of both that goofy classical and a little more of the, you know, uptight, stuck up version of the Penguin. He's not running a club or anything, but I kind of just I dig that vibe. Of course, in the movies, we have Colin Farrell, Danny DeVito, and Burgess Meredith, all of whom have brought forth something completely different to this character. And so you kind of get your flavor of Penguin depending on, which movie you're watching. Do you have any preferences for one over the other?
Probably Burgess Meredith, to be honest. He's so funny and great in that role. And, in the movie when he's, was it Comrade Schmidlap or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, like I don't know, like he's just so great in that role. He's so funny. Like he looks exactly like like a 60s penguin. Like I remember having a penguin toy as a kid. I think it was like that Superpowers line. Like he was like Penguin was a prominent character in DC, and he was in that superpowers line. And I had that toy, and Penguin looked so Burgess Meredith looked exactly like that. Like I love the DeVito, I love the Colin Farrell, but there is something kind of charming about Burgess Meredith's Penguin.
I do remember the toy you're talking about, and I feel like even as late as like the 89 film, they were still making
Yeah, I think for Batman Returns, they just repainted it black and red, so it looked nothing like Danny DeVito at all. So it was that old superpowers Penguin, but just with a different painting.
Hey, if you got a mold, go with it.
Yeah,
And I'm surprised by your pick. I like Burgess Meredith. I think he's fun. I feel like for a certain generation, he really got people into the Penguin.
yeah,
And like he's always a good
yeah.
time. He's like such a committed actor to the role. So I mean I grew up watching those and enjoying those. But yeah, I thought you were gonna say something totally different.
No, yeah, like I know Penguin's almost. I know he's got his own solo title now, but for years it was he was a top four Batman villain. Like there was a reason like he was one of the four villains in Batman '66. There was a reason he was in the second Batman solo movie he was the main villain, and he was almost kind of put to the side for a while, almost while like everyone was like in love with Bane and things like that. But Penguin, I would consider him a Mount Rushmore Batman villain.
Yeah. No, I would agree. Well, and like I feel like, and then granted, this is kind of funny because it ties into No Man's Land a little bit, but I feel like for Batman, Penguin kind of is like the Gotham City Lex Luthor-y type for Batman because he's like a guy with no powers. He can't really, he's got like umbrellas and like guns and stuff, but like it's not like he has some weird, special ability or some kind of training or something. He's just like
Yeah,
a
yeah, he's not.
mastermind.
He's not crazy like the Joker. He's not, leaving. He doesn't have a gimmick like the Riddler or things like that. He's the gentleman of crime. I think they call him in that show. He's always well dressed, got the monocle. He's got a cigarette. I love in Batman '66 when I think all the villains are flying on those giant umbrellas,
Yeah.
using them for transportation. But even in Batman Returns, like you see him with umbrellas. He's got the one like the propeller one that he flies off, and he's always kind of using them to like hypnotize people. So
Yeah.
I wonder. We got no hint of umbrellas in the Batman, so I wonder if this is going to end like the last shot is raining and Colin Farrell kind of gets an umbrella and he walks out or something like that.
Yeah, I wonder maybe if we'll get like a gun or something, just like a single fire, I don't know.
It's cool.
It was just like,
it's
yeah.
bang right there.
I mean, you could even do it like The Godfather or something, where he's like meeting somebody, he's going to kill him, and he can't walk in with a gun, so he brings an umbrella.
Yeah, something, some nod to umbrellas.
I feel like there's a way to do that and make it cool. But yeah, no, I agree with all of that. He is kind of a top tier villain, and like kind of going back to the Lex Luthor thing I was saying is I like that his downfall, depending on the story, and a lot of stories really is like his jealousy, and like obsessiveness with trying to be the boss of everything, and that is more of a master planner, criminal mastermind type of ego problem.
Who's your favorite?
Personally,
Who's your favorite? Who's your favorite?
oh yeah, I was gonna just jump into that. I was gonna say personally, um, so I like all three. I have a hard time having to pick between all three. I will say Colin Farrell really gave my favorite a run for his money, but I gotta go with Danny DeVito. I don't know. There's just something weirdly charming about that portrayal. He's like horrifying and he's a monster but it's also kind of goofy and he's a man who is horribly sexually repressed.
No, but yeah, I mean, they're probably the only one of Batman's rogues gallery who could have run a legitimate mayoral campaign and like hit like Danny DeVito and Burgess Meredith both ran for mayor, which is a great episode in Batman '66.
Yeah. Oh, I love that one.
Yeah, and they almost kind of used like that was like almost the basis for Batman Returns almost, but I can't think of any other villain who could actually run for mayor and win.
Right?
Yeah.
One thing I will say, I mean, we didn't talk about TV or animated or anything. I mean, we could do a whole ranking episode later and really get into it. But I do want to give a mention to Robin Lord Taylor, who played him in the Gotham TV show. That show I do not like, but And Robin Lord Taylor really played one hell of a penguin and was probably like the person carrying the show throughout much of it. So
Sure, for sure.
that said, we have one more topic, totally penguinless to get to. It's just a quick little update, because this is something I'm into. I know I've mentioned in a previous cast, but for fans who liked the Batman and Robin Build-A-Figure wave that came out by McFarlane, as I did, and I have all four of them to my left hanging out on a shelf. WonderCon just happened, and we got a glimpse of more McFarlane toys coming out. And BJ, you actually beat me to this punch and sent this to me, but we're getting a Batman Forever Build-A-Figure wave. I will have a link below, but in this wave, you get Batman, Robin, Riddler, Two-Face. The likenesses look pretty good, and if you collect all four, you build the Nightmare Bat from that dream sequence.
Yeah, the minute I saw it, I thought of you right away. I sent it to you right away. I know you'd probably jump on that right away. I can't remember. Is the Batman figure the that sonar suit he wears at the end, or
It looks like it's the first suit.
is it the regular black suit?
Yeah. I don't know.
All
It's hard to
right.
say. Like, we'll see when it comes out because I'm sure there'll be a little more detail, but that's what it looked like. I'm so happy though to have a Robin in his, red and green.
Yeah, for sure. I saw that. I was like, I might have to get the Robin at least because I do love Batman Forever. I think it's pretty underrated in terms of Batman movies, and Robin's my favorite. And that is the closest part we've gotten to a traditional red and green suit on film, at least.
For sure. And that, ladies and gentlemen, Bats and Worms, is our episode. Again, the things we are talking about, the teaser trailer, the action figure line, and all that, and the Colin Farrell interview, all those will be linked below. If you want more from the Batman universe, you can visit us at thebatmanuniverse.net for comic reviews, movie news, and so on and so forth. You want to chat with us? Hop on our Discord link, which will also be posted below. You can also write to us at tbu@thebatmanuniverse.net, and we'll respond to your comments on air. If you like these episodes, please subscribe, rate, and share. For BJ and myself, thanks for listening.